Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the DRCOG Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, November 20th. It's 6:30, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Of the United States of America. Ms. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Steve O'Dorisio, Adams County. Lynn Baca, Adams County. Jeff Baker, Arapahoe County.
Here.
Claire Levy, Boulder County. Here. Austin Ward, City and County of Broomfield.
Here.
Randy Wheelock, Clear Creek County. Here. Adam Paul, Denver. Here. Kevin Flynn, Denver.
Here.
George Teal, Douglas County. Abe Layton, Douglas County. Marie Mornis, Gilpin County. Andy Kerr, Jefferson County. Here. Lisa Foray, Arvada. Sharon Davis, Arvada. Angela Lawson, Aurora. Allison Coombs, Aurora. Larry Vittum, Bennett. Royce Mendel, Bennett. David Spellman, Blackhawk. Nicole Spear, Boulder. Margot Ramsden, Bomar. Greg Mills, Brighton.
Here.
Deborah Mulvey, Castle Pines. Roger Hudson, Castle Pines. Tim Dietz, Castle Rock. Jason Gray, Castle Rock. Tammy Maurer, Centennial. Todd Williams, City of Central. Randy Wheel, Cherry Hills Village. Earl Holen, Cherry Hills Village. Steve Douglas, Commerce City.
Present.
Michelle Rogers, Dacono. Adam Moorhead, Dacono. Steve Conklin, Edgewater. Good evening. Othaniel Sierra, Inglewood. Kim Wright, Inglewood. Emily Bayer, Erie. Linda Montoya, Federal Heights. Sarah Dawn Pearlstein, Federal Heights. Ray Bird, Firestone. Don Cognac, Firestone. Josie Cockrell, Foxfield. Wendy Padilla, Frederick. Lynette Kelsey, Georgetown. Rachel Binkley, Glendale. Paul Hazen, Golden. Lisa Vitry, Golden. George Lance, Greenwood Village. Dave Kerber, Greenwood Village. Chuck Harmon, Idaho Springs. Brian Wong, Lafayette. Jeslyn Sherzai, Lakewood. Stephen Barr, Littleton.
Here.
There we go. Kat Bristow, Lockbuoy. Jacqueline White, Lockbuoy. Marissa Harmon, Lone Tree. Joan Peck, Longmont. Aaron Rodriguez, Longmont. Judy Kern, Louisville. Holly Rogan, Lyons. Colleen Whitlow, Meade. Paul Sutton, Morrison. Nicole Sterling, Nederland. Richard Kondo, North Glen. John Dyack, Parker. Terrence Kelly, Sheridan.
Here.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Neil Shaw, Superior. Here. Justin Martinez, Thornton. Here. Sarah Nermella, Westminster.
Here.
Bud Starker, Wheat Ridge. Darius Pakbaz, CDOT. Sally Chafee, CDOT. Bill Soroy, RTD. Here. All right, and with that, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Our agenda is approved. Next item is a report of the chair. I have a gentle reminder that board members who need to participate in board meetings virtually, here are some of the quotes directly from our policy. Requests must be submitted by the member representative to the chair and the executive director no later than 3 hours before the start of the meeting and will be authorized by the chair. The member representative shall state the reason for electronic participation and acknowledgement that an attempt has been made to secure the attendance of the alternate. Board member representatives may request to participate electronically if their alternate is unavailable to be present and or prepared and the member representative is traveling for work out of medical necessity or if authorized by the chair. Melinda has provided a link to the restricted hybrid meeting option in the calendar invite for this meeting, but please reach out to her if you need it to be resent. So that's just a general reminder. We are kind of in a transition period with that policy. So I'm being pretty lenient And we do have 4 members that are virtual tonight. So with that, I would like a report from the Performance and Engagement Committee.
Good evening. 2 meetings that we've had since we were last together. We had a special meeting earlier in the month where we reviewed the item that will come up later on the agenda in regards to nominating committee procedures, et cetera. And then we had a meeting tonight where we did Executive Director Doug Rex's review. I want to thank everyone that submitted the evaluation, the review form online. We had a record number this year, so we are incredibly appreciative of that. I will tell you that our review of Director Rex was positive, encouraging him to stay here for a long time. With that, I will also share that in keeping with the increase given to other DRCOG staff, we voted to approve a 4% increase in his compensation. And that completes my report.
Thank you very much. Director Kondo, can you give us a report on the Finance and Budget Committee?
Sure. So tonight we finally selected our representative to the Performance and Engagement Committee, and also in addition, Nominating Committee, I'm sorry. And also completed a number of action items to approve the Executive Director to take actions to either amend, negotiate, and execute a number of contracts. Then lastly, I just wanted to give a shout out to Lakewood for their 50th anniversary at NLC. Our very own Director, Scheherazade, was there in front of 4,000 plus people there, and so congratulations, Lakewood.
Thank you. We're going to move into public comment. I just want to make sure that everybody knows. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Forgot his evaluation.
Yeah, that's right. I'm done.
Executive Director Rex.
You already dealt with him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And listen, seeing we're on the topic, I just wanted to thank you all again for the confidence you have in me and the great work of all staff at DRCOG. I'm very fortunate to have the 150 plus staff members that we have, and the senior leadership team that we have is second to none. So I'm so appreciative for all of them. But I'm truly appreciative of this board too. We have a wonderful board, and we're the 3rd oldest council of governments in the country, and there's a reason it works here, right? We have a history of working together and understanding that, you know, there's certain complexities that make it a must that we work together. So I thank you all for your dedication to this collaborative. I first wanted to mention that this week is Crash Responders Safety Week, and I'm sure I speak for the entire board by expressing our gratitude and respect for all first responders who work tirelessly in risky situations, risky environments to protect us as travelers. I appreciate the attention that's being drawn to these folks. I've served on the Governor's Task Force for First Responder Safety for a number of years now, and I think slowly but surely we're starting to make a dent in the communication and messaging associated with this. It's a labor of love for those folks, because I don't know why else you would do it. They're wonderful people, and their lives are on the line every day. And so please keep them in your hearts and prayers, and do your part and reduce your speed as you're going through work zones, or if there's a car pulled over on the road and all that kind of good stuff. So please do so. Medicare open enrollment ends on December 7th. The DRCOG SHIP team, which is State Health Insurance Assistance Program team, stands at the ready to help residents in your communities to better understand their options. We also have some great information on our website, so if you get questions, you can certainly direct them to our website. And there's also, we have a video on there that kind of explains the ins and outs of the Medicare programs, but we're standing ready to answer the calls that we receive from the residents of the region. Go-Tober, our Way to Go team wrapped up its annual Go-Tober campaign, working with employers in the region to promote commute options in the workplace. And I want to congratulate the employers from across the region who saw the biggest shift in eco-friendly trips during October. The winning organizations were featured in the Denver Business Journal and honored by size category. In the 2,000 plus employee category, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. In the large, which is 500 to 2,000 employees, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Medium category, 100 to 500 employees, PCL Construction. small category, 51 to 100 employees, ShopWorks Architecture, and extra small, 1 to 50 employees, was Pet Sustainability Coalition. So big shout out to all those groups. And like I said, we took out advertisement in the Business Journal, recognizing the good work of those organizations and businesses. Decarbonize DRCOG update. So that's our EPA grant. It's been a busy month, trying to hire some additional staff, get us going in that program. But the biggest news is probably on November 12th and 13th, DRCOG staff and grant program partners attended a 2-day workshop meeting with representatives from Xcel Energy, the Colorado Energy Office, Rewiring America, and the Collective Clean Energy Fund. And the goal was to build a shared understanding of the 5 complementary programs, their status, their interactions, and opportunity for collaboration. Collectively, between the 5 groups, these organizations represent about $1 billion of funding over the next 5 to 7 years, aimed at accelerating building decarbonization, transforming the market, and enhancing the customer experience. What I understand, I talked to Steve and Robert Spots about this. The energy enthusiasm in the room was wonderful, and it's so nice that we are able to work in tandem with these four wonderful groups. The network will continue to meet regularly to advance key coordination priorities, including market shaping and messaging, workforce development and contractor support, building the capacity needed to meet the program demands, and program mechanics, ensuring seamless integration and execution of initiatives. So we'll continue that collaborative. Last but not least, I just wanted to point out that myself and at least Director Conklin had the opportunity on November 8th, I only do this because I know it embarrasses him, at the Denver Film Fest. We mentioned this last time, the screening of Kevin's movie, The Order, was done at the Ellie Calkin Opera House, and it was wonderful. Yes, holiday hit of the season. No, it is not that. Yeah, it's not all that. But it does come out during the holiday season. It comes out in early December, right? It hits theaters. Well, listen, it's not from the lack of asking, because I've been on him for a year trying to get this screening, but Denver Film Fest, right? I guess they're a little bigger than us. But yeah, listen, I would strongly encourage you to watch this movie. I was actually surprised. I thought there was going to be more of it was actually in Denver, but it really isn't. It's a very small snippet of it that was in Denver. But what I thought was wonderful was afterwards there was a little panel discussion, Kevin, as well as what was it? Kate Sussman, which is Mary Beth Sussman's daughter, right, Kevin?
He's one of the producers.
Yeah, she's one of the producers, and Mayor Johnston facilitated that conversation, and it was really cool to get some of the insights and what was all going on. Kevin, of course, he was absolutely wonderful, as he always is. So it was great.
Talk to my wife.
No. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. It was wonderful. I think Steve and I really enjoyed ourselves, so congratulations, sir.
Thank you. And I just want to say one thing that I found really touching is that the first theater that I've seen it booked in, because I signed up for Fandango, is the AMC Westminster Promenade. And what I think is really nice about this, it means a lot to me, nothing to anybody else here, but I hope you appreciate it. My co-author died 9 years ago, Gary Gerhardt. His widow lives in Westminster. She lives within eyesight of that theater. And when I called her to tell her that that's the first theater I saw it in, she said, it's kind of emotional, said, that's Gary looking out for me. That meant a lot to me. Thank you.
That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to public comment. Up to 45 minutes is allocated now for public comment, and each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. If there are additional requests from the public to address the board, time will be allocated at the end of the meeting to complete public comment. The chair requests that there be no public comment on issues for which a prior public hearing has been held before this board. Consent and action items will begin immediately after the last speaker. I see we do have a member of the public here. Please state your name and where you're from, and you have your 3 minutes.
My name is Randall Loeb, and I am a citizen first and foremost in this country and this world, and I am concerned, deeply concerned about our future. And that's the only reason why I'm here tonight. I need to get to bed because being 74, I have to get up at 6 to get to work, and I work really hard. This is the only night I had off from my Argus job at the Paramount Theater. So instead of dancing for you, I will speak about the subject. You are, without question, the most important part of our country and this democracy in the local affairs that you take responsibility for, and I mean everybody. And I mean those people who are on the line too and who are out the door. If we don't take seriously the need for us to take care of this place we are right now, right here, then we're going to lose it all. That's how strongly I feel about this. And I've been talking about this, as I was telling John, since you were over on Cherry Creek, in case any of you know when that was. And so I don't rise to this at this point lightly, but on the 21st of December, we read the names of everybody who died who was homeless in the geographical area, including Denver Regional Council of Governments. And we also have, on that Saturday at 4 o'clock at the east steps of the Capitol, an opportunity to extend ourselves to care and have compassion for those who do not have a chance and who will be threatened by militias and other people who intentionally are taking away our rights. And that I don't take lightly. And I started in my childhood in Elkins Park in Philadelphia under the wing of my mom and dad, who are both part of the League of Women Voters and also involved in taking care of responsibility. And I think anybody who doesn't vote and take care of themselves on this day is wasting our time and our energy to protect our government. I was a voter, poll worker outside at Blair Caldwell Library for 13 days in Spanish. I'm bilingual, and I could not believe the ignorance of people in being able to exercise their right to vote, just simply put down what it is that they want to support. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Randall. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else in the room? Yes, please come forward, state your name and where you're from.
Good evening. My name is PJ Holtz. I'm a resident of Evergreen. I'm speaking tonight on the proposed amendments to the 2024-2027 TIP. This includes a new project for Aurora entitled Box Elder Creek Erosion and Flood Protection, adding $10.8 million to federal funding in the TIP from the Protect program, $23 million federal funding to the TIP from the Safe Streets Road program from the Safe Streets for Boulder project, Protect, a resiliency program, and Safe Streets are funded through the current Surface Transportation Bill, the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, or IJA. Historically, the Surface Transportation Bill relied on funding through the federal gas tax. And as the political appetite for increasing the gas tax has waned over successive authorization bills, Congress began to rely more and more on plussing up or creating whole new programs by delving into the general treasury, which is really borrowing. As you may know, though, this borrowing was supersized in IJA, creating significant impacts to the deficit, which may have merit within a pandemic, but at some point we need to pay the bill, and certainly not make matters worse in accepting federal funding when it's not necessary. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office places IJA's share of the deficit as between $256 billion and $307 billion. Deficit spending, as this TIP amendment does, impacts the economy, even as this is two small projects, impacts the economy nationally by slowing economic growth and increasing interest rates. Meanwhile, the purchase power of these dollars have been significantly diminished because of inflation. Do you know the price of simple sandstone and gravel on this project? Or the hot mix? Or the concrete? Or the engineering consulting fees on this project? Are you fully immersed at the project level on these two proposed projects to know if the designs will be done in paper? Or even if they're done digitally, will they be constructible models that a general contractor can use? Other than a wish, what's being turned over to the owner-operator or CDOT to maintain the asset? So why mortgage our children or our grandchildren's future for this need? Common Coloradans are up in arms over the price of eggs. What will happen when they fully appreciate how their current gas tax dollars are used or their children's tax dollars are used? Essentially, are you present in the times in which we live? Are you present at the project level? Or do you fall into the unfortunate mental trap in transportation where if we don't pursue these federal dollars, someone else will? At some point, the juice is not worth the squeeze. This has certainly been true at the project level in transportation since the pandemic, but it has now reached the program level. Send a message to FHWA, thanks, but no thanks. And I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else here in person that would like to address this body? None? None online. Thank you very much for your comments tonight. We really appreciate that. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have the 3 items, including the minutes from October 16th, amendments to the TIP, and amendments to the policies for the TIP. Has everyone had a chance to review those items? Is there anyone who would like to pull one of those from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion. And a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. Any abstentions? The consent agenda has been approved. We're going to move on to action items. Item number 9, discussion on amendments to the 2024-2027 Transportation Improvement Program. This is what we're referring to as the second set. So we're going to have a presentation by Josh Schwenk, Planner, Transportation Planning and Operations. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. We do have several proposed amendments to our Transportation Improvement Program for your consideration tonight. The first 2 are related to funding, which was returned by the City of Englewood back to the Arapahoe County Subregional Forum. According to our TIP policy, when funding is returned to a forum, we then reach out to sponsors of projects on the TIP wait list for that forum. The Arapahoe Forum had 2 projects listed on their wait list, both sponsored by Arapahoe County, and they both declined the funding, which was returned. This left us in a little bit of a bind, as the TIP policy does not clearly state what is the next step once we've fully exhausted the wait list. So the forum did meet to discuss what to do with this funding, and it was decided to apply it towards 2 projects which have had cost increases related to changes or additions to their scope. Those 2 projects being Littleton's Mineral and Santa Fe intersection improvements, which the forum recommended an additional $3,390,000 for, and Centennial's Arapahoe Side Path project, which the forum recommended $2 million for. As part of your motion tonight, you will notice that we are asking for just a one-time exception to the TIP policy, considering that this is beyond our regular waitlist process, which is stated in the policy. The next 3 projects are federal discretionary awards. So these are awards made by USDOT in Washington, D.C. They account for $11.5 million in infra funding going to CDOT's US 287 safety project, $23.8 million in the Federal Protect program going to the City of Golden for their Lena Gulch project, and $4 million from the Federal Protect program going to Denver's Sanderson Gulch project. Be happy to take any questions about any of these projects. Otherwise, we do have this proposed motion available for you in your packet. You'll see highlighted on your screen.
Questions? I blanked, sorry, Tammy. Go ahead. Director Maurer.
Just have a comment. The funding that came back to us from, and I'm talking about the Arapahoe County Transportation Forum, and the funding that came back to us from Inglewood, we had the opportunity to talk about it between some needs of some projects that already had been decided, but there was extra cost to them. And so I just want to say that the forum was wonderful. We had to have a 2/3 vote on this. And that meant a lot of people had to get on that phone online and vote and to get that passed, because otherwise it would have not gone forward. So I just want to say how much I really appreciated our forum in doing that for us.
Thank you. Director Levy.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question. I haven't seen this before. I think you said that this kind of, we don't really have rules for this or a policy on how to allocate these funds. I am just sort of wanting to understand a little bit more about the implications when a project hasn't been on the wait list. So where does it come from? and was it scored? You know, thanks, Director Maurer, for, explaining all the support and the forum. I just want to know a little bit more about, like, where else might this money have gone? And because it didn't go through the regular process, was it scored consistently with everything else?
Yes, and that was part of the forum's consideration. They only opened this up to projects that were already in the TIP, so had already gone through the full scoring process, had been selected for funding, but that maybe were experiencing cost increases due to, as project development went on, there were some changes in their scope elements. So those projects then came to the forum to present their situation and sort of make the case for additional funding, and then that was discussed by the forum as a whole to make these recommendations.
Director Barr.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone for accommodating this input in a hybrid fashion, so it's much appreciated. I just wanted to follow on to Director Maurer's comments, also expressing Littleton's gratitude to the subregional TIP as well as this board for supporting what might be seen as an exception or a bit of an unusual action regarding this TIP allocation. As a board member, I would also feel that reallocating for projects within the same subregional TIP feels like it is staying within the spirit and the purpose of having our subregional TIPs to make sure that these resources are equitably divided amongst our municipalities, our jurisdictions. Our particular project, as kind of was mentioned before in the presentation, also is, like many of yours maybe, is experiencing just dramatic cost inflation that had occurred during COVID. And as we attempted to put together funding partners and stakeholders, still finding us short. So again, appreciate everyone's time and attention on this and the work of the DRCOG staff and the subregional committee.
Director Dyack.
Thank you very much. To me, I'm supportive of the list. It's just the question is, do we need to go back to policy to try to revise based off of learned lessons here? We tried to think of everything, and I thought, maybe the subregion had the ability to kind of bank the funds for the next TIP in an abstract way, but that may not be the case. So maybe it might be good to just sort of go through the policy just to make sure that we have consistency for everyone. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Just a quick response to that. Staff is definitely looking into that as we develop the next TIP policy related to our next calls for projects. We will definitely be going back and adding some clarifying language on what to do in these situations.
Any other questions? Not. I believe there's a motion on the screen. I'd entertain a motion.
Chair,
Yes, Director Starker.
I move to approve the attached project amendments to the 2024-2027 TIP, including an exception to the TIP policy to allow the Arapahoe County Subregional Form action.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, bless you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
For the next action item, I'm going to have an introduction by Director Conklin first, and we'll go ahead and proceed.
Yep, good evening. Coming to you as Chair of Performance and Engagement. I made reference to our meeting that happened earlier in the month where we talked about the nominating guidelines, and that was actually, I think, our third meeting where we had that conversation. Basically, the nominating committee from last year came to P&E and asked for us to take a look at the nominating guidelines and potentially provide some clarification or some updates. And so we had a robust conversation on that. The nominating committee is charged with presenting a slate to this body in terms of board officers. And, you know, it's kind of a mix of what is history, but also what is the nimbleness and flexibility we want the nominating committee to have in terms of making some of those decisions. So an awkward balance, and it took us a while to get there, but the Performance and Engagement Committee did vote to make some changes and to send this to this body for action. And we wanted to go through that before we continue with the next item, which is selection of more people for the nominating committee. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Director Rex to give a little bit more detail.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Conklin and Big Chair Board. Jeff Baker. So thank you all very much. Listen, I think Director Conklin did a good job of kind of summarizing exactly where we are with this and the reason for it. We really just, there might have been some ambiguity within the nominating committee guidelines that caused some pause about, you know, what the practice has been in the past with regards to the selection of board officers. So we wanted to kind of shore that up a little bit. We also, as you will see, this proposal grants the nominating committee authority to make recommendation to the board on all of our regional committees as well. We felt that would be a very good step because they can consider a lot of other factors in their deliberation that we might necessarily can't do when we're just doing general ballots for these things. So we thought it was a good opportunity to include that too. So I'm going to walk you through just kind of the main items that have been changed in the document. There's nothing really on the first page that was changed, but, how do I get to the, all right. So like I said, there was nothing of any consequence on the first page. Second page, this is the reference to the nominating committee having the authority to make a recommendation of member representatives to serve on our various regional committees in which we have appointments. And there's some listed here as examples. There will be another one added to this list as early as next month. It's related to our economic development district designation that we're seeking. There's an advisory committee to that. But anyway, but this is an evergreen statement related to that. So they'll make those recommendations typically in the spring of the year for most of the committees. And then under the other procedures and guidelines, there's a couple new paragraphs in here which I think is worth reading. The first is basically, again, it speaks to the reason that when we went through our our strategy work back several years ago now, my word, what, 7, 8 years ago probably, in which we used to have an administrative committee, and that was then split out to the Performance and Engagement Committee and the Finance and Budget Committee. And during that time, we also created, the nominating committee, and the whole concept behind this was that the nominating committee shall strive to ensure its recommendations for appointments are representative of the board considering community size, strategic location, the rate of growth, county and municipality, rural and suburban, and other factors encouraging diversity. So that is the goal in what they're trying to do as they bring forth recommendations to you all. And the executive committee recommendations, the board recognizes the importance of leadership succession in reaching its desired outcomes and to ensure the board officers have a well-rounded understanding of DRCOG's operations. As such, board officer positions are intended to be progressive from treasurer, secretary, vice chair, chair, and immediate past chair. Again, when we went through that strategic exercise with the board several years ago, there was an acknowledgement at the time that the board officers, in order for them to get a comprehensive understanding of all the various aspects of the agency, that it made sense that if they progressed through the board officer chain, they would have opportunities to serve as chair of the Finance and Budget Committee first as treasurer, and then as secretary they would serve as the chair of the Performance and Engagement Committee, and then obviously then as vice chair, and then chair would have a clear understanding of all the functions of the agency. So basically, the rest of it just kind of follows on, and well, there's nothing of any real consequence there on that page. But on this page talks about each individual board officer and the considerations giving. So the one in the vice chair that really I would like to point out to you all is that consideration, as has always been the case, at least in my time here, may be given to the sitting secretary to assume that role. And this language that's in blue was language that our legal counsel has included. Basically, consideration may be given to the sitting secretary, assuming the individual is willing and able to serve and has acted at all times within the scope of the secretary's lawful authority, in accordance with the highest ethical standards, and in a manner that accords all persons with respect and dignity. That's a lot more words than what I had in there originally, wasn't it? No, but it sounds really good. Additionally, the nominating committee will evaluate the ability of individuals being considered for vice chair to serve as chair without interruption due to term limits. You may recall that in the previous version of this, it talked about term limits and it talked about elections too, but we removed the elections part of that, because if you are to, if you go from treasurer to immediate past chair, it's 5 years, right? I don't think there's anybody here that serves a 5-year term. So you probably have to go through an election cycle to be able to do that, right, if you so desire. But I think there is at least an evaluation the nominating committee will perform to at least acknowledge that a person that is being recommended for vice chair has the ability to serve as chair, right? They're not termed, or they have another path. If they're termed as a council member, maybe they're planning on running for mayor, right, or something like that. So all those things are taken into consideration, and that's just for the vice chair with regards to term limits, because the vice chair becomes the board chair automatically, assuming they're able to serve. And then for the position of secretary is basically the same knowledge consideration may be given to the sitting board treasurer, assuming the individual legal counsel language, and all that kind of good stuff. So again, it basically just describes what our current practice has been in selection of board officers. And yeah, that's really it. The other thing of note is that the nominating committee does already make recommendations for appointment to Finance and Budget and Performance and Engagement Committee. It used to be stated that it was done in the January meeting, and quite frankly, that was never done in the January meeting. It's always the February meeting, because quite frankly, we don't even know who our board reps are come January, because you all, coming out of election cycles and the like, there could be some changes. So we just called that out and showed it as a February board action. That's it. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have, or any member of the Forums and Engagement Committee, I'm sure, would be happy to weigh in.
Director Levy.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question so much as a comment that I just want to make, and maybe this is a preface to proposing an amendment to this. So on the the criteria, strive to ensure recommendations are representative of the board, considering community size, geographic location, rate of growth, county and municipality, rural, suburban, and other factors encouraging diversity. I bring this up, I guess I'm wondering about the other factors and whether it might be good to include in here having striving for gender balance or gender representation. And I bring this up because we recently had appointments to the advisory committee for the carbon decarbonization program. And there were 7 people who sought positions. There were 4 available, 4 men and 3 women applied, and all 4 men were selected. And I know, we all represent our governments to the best that we can, and I am here on behalf of Boulder County. But I think it's worth noting gender representation in there explicitly. I don't see any of these as saying, you must have exact balance or exact representation, but I think it's recognition that on a board as diverse as ours and that has so many women serving very capably and in leadership positions that we ought to call that out. And if whenever is the appropriate time, I guess we need a motion on the floor so I can then propose an amendment to that, but I did want to put that out.
I did add it just for visual purposes more than anything else.
Thank you.
Other discussion? Director Conklin.
Yeah, to that point, agreed. And I think that the situation with the greenhouse gas was interesting because it was a vote and how that all happens. Some of that was, who knows how that happened. I think Mr. Rex and I thought about that being included in the draft as we worked it through. One of the challenges is with talking about those areas of diversity, are we able to give an all-inclusive list? Are we able to deal with ethnicity, sexual preference, gender, on and on? The community size, geographic, and rate of growth, county and municipal, seem to be very specific DRCOG things, and then it was left as in other factors, really acknowledging those many other aspects of that is quite a lengthy list. And one of the reasons you've seen that we've talked about things going to the nominating committee is for them to be able to take all of those things into account, which is a little more challenging in a strictly voting situation. So absolutely, I think the only question I would raise in terms of making that amendment is do we then go and list all of the other aspects of diversity that we want to be sure we're considering?
If I could, yeah, and Director Coughlin, I recognize that challenge, and if you put one out, and there are many other aspects of diversity, and I agree with you. We are really here as member governments, not as individuals. I think it was just so striking that on this committee that will have a great deal to say about expending a tremendous amount of money and transforming our area for the better. I think were it not for that, I would not be thinking about that specific aspect. There are a lot of different qualities that all of us bring in addition to representing our member government. But I think it was just a very, very striking in that instance. So I would appreciate just having it as a factor to be considered.
Thank you, Director Levy. Other questions or comments? Yes.
I just had a thought for if we were going to explicitly call out gender, I wonder if getting to this point about there being so many other factors that are a part of this too, if we could say something like gender and other social and economic factors encouraging diversity or something like that, that kind of has a bucket, but maybe a compromised way of getting some of that in there.
Director Wheelock.
Yes, thank you. I actually support doing exactly what's been said in gender representation and other underrepresented demographics or categories, however we want to use the word, would be very much appropriate. I count the room now and I see there are about 30 of us here. There are about 13 women. And as I look around the room, and so I tend to do that in rooms a lot. And I've been told over the years that it's that equality of representation that makes a better conversation. And, you know, I think it's fair to argue that all of us are here to represent well, but it's also fair to acknowledge that having more diversity in that representation is going to build a better conversation and bring a lot more perspectives to the room that we otherwise would not hear.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes. Director Wong.
One comment I would make is, while I would like to see us, I struggle with this because I do struggle with the list that then would have to occur, but I would say, when looking at specifically, and I'm not trying to rehash again, we'd have to go into discussion and understanding why, but when we talk about diversity, what we saw in the vote from a gender perspective, yes. But I think we also have to look at that 3/4 or 3 of the 4 men that were appointed were of diverse populations that are less than 13 people sitting in this room tonight. So really, I think as a member of a minority population, I struggle with that. And so I have some concerns by not listing ethnicity and the other pieces as part of that. That's just where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the concerns that were brought up tonight, when I cast my votes for whatever, if it's something in this room or my ballot from this past election, I go off the merit of the people. I'm not going off the gender or the race or anything like that. If they align with my values, that's how I'm selecting the candidates that I want to vote for. So, you know, honestly, if we're going off of gender or race or anything like that when we're considering people, I mean, we probably would have had a different governor 2 years ago. I mean, a lot of things would have changed. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Director Karazai.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a great point, but I also would argue that everybody in this room is a fantastic representation of their community, so we're asking to go one level further. We know that there is a lot of merit and expertise that comes in this space, and so if we have more of a homogeneous thought, if we're not considering community size, if we're not considering rural versus urban or suburban, if we're not considering gender, then we do not have diversity in thinking, and there's too much money coming out of this body and too many important decisions being made, where I do think it's pertinent that we have that level of consideration in how we're creating those bodies, because we all bring merit to this space and we all bring that expertise. So that's why this was illustrated in this policies and procedures, because we do need to move away from practices and traditions that are longstanding and to writing this out in policy for the direction that we see our agency going.
Thank you. More discussion. Director Wheelock, is your name tag up for, oh, just want to make sure you were done. Okay. All right. It looks as if discussion has ended. Is there, how would the motion, I'm not sure.
I guess I need some guidance.
Or do we, Director Levy?
Well, maybe our chair wants to, or not chair, but our, whatever.
Executive Director.
Executive Director wants to make a suggestion. I think the best way to do this would be to move approval of the amendments as presented by the nominating committee, and then I can make an amendment to that motion, and that can be voted on separately, up or down, so that the whole, we can consider that on its own merits. Otherwise, I'm happy to move this procedure as amended on the screen.
I heard you say that we could be looking for a motion to just frame the conversation. So the motion would be to approve the amended standing committee articles of association as presented originally, and then we will, if there's a motion for that, to approve the articles of association as were originally presented tonight.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I don't know if you're going to make a motion. I almost think that muddies it a little bit, because if we approve it, action is done.
And she would make.
But once the motion is made, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wouldn't be action. Yep.
I'm going to move that motion that you just made, Chair Baker.
Thank you, Director Ward has made the motion. Is there a second? Second by Director Flynn. Director Levy.
Thank you. I move that we amend that motion to include gender representation. Period.
Director Ward, do you consider that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I will consider it a friendly amendment.
And Director Flynn? Second? Okay.
I was smiling.
So we take the amended motion first, and so it replaced the original motion. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the amended motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is item number 11 on the agenda, an action item to select a representative to the nominating committee. Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And so here we are. So then just a little bit of background on the nominating committee, as you saw what the role and responsibilities are of the nominating committee. I just want to give you a little bit of background with regards to how many seats are on the nominating committee, who makes those appointments, et cetera. So there are 6 seats on the nominating committee. The Performance and Engagement Committee and Finance and Budget Committee have appointments, and they've both made their selections. The Performance and Engagement Committee has selected Director Nicole Spear from Boulder, and the Finance and Budget Committee has selected Director Andy Kerr, Commissioner, Jefferson County. So we have the City County of Denver has a permanent seat on the nominating committee, and that is, my understanding, is going to be filled by Director Flynn. So there are 3 seats remaining. The board, the immediate past chair serves on the nominating committee, and that's of course Director Steve Conklin. So there are 2 seats left. One, the board itself gets to select a member to serve on the nominating committee, and the board chair has an appointment. So, yeah. So, another point I might just raise, that if you do, raise your hand to be considered for the nominating committee, you are unable to throw your name in the hat to serve on the board as a board officer, because obviously you would be making a recommendation. And yeah, that's really it. I would really, we have no one from the South Side right now. And I think, if someone is interested on the south side, I think that would be great. But, regardless, we need to get someone from the board to fill that seat.
So, the chair will open up nominations from the floor for recommending or making nominations for someone to fill one of the positions on the nominating committee. And Director Scherer is aye.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Director Austin Ward from the City and County of Broomfield.
Thank you very much. First, I think we need to make sure you would accept that nomination. Director Ward?
Yes, I will accept the nomination.
All right. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Director Whitlow?
I'd like to nominate Director Dyack from the town of Parker.
So there's a second nomination. Director Dyack, would you accept that nomination? All right. So we have two candidates. Is there anyone else? Are there any motions to close the nominations at this point? Okay, we have a motion and a second. So nominations are closed. We have two candidates. Okay. I committed that I would discuss this with.
Head nods.
All right. So, ladies, go ahead.
The conversation of executive committee is that the final appointment from you would happen at a later date.
Yes.
Based on our desire to have as diverse a body as possible.
Correct.
So, great, thank you.
So, I'm going to hold myself to that. So, what we're going to do is hold a vote. We can do this secret ballot, or we can do it by a show of hands. I think we're close enough that we could just do it by a show of hands. Okay with that? Okay.
Well, we've always done a secret ballot, but.
We've always done it a secret ballot? What's the preference of the body? Is there? Secret ballot, okay. Everybody get out a piece of paper. Okay. We're prepared. Okay, hold up a minute, Melinda. We have a new development.
Solution.
Yes.
Solution in the works.
So I'm just trying to expedite this. Austin's a fantastic person. I will withdraw, and then I will let the chair at a future point in time pick someone. How about that? Is that okay? All right.
I'm looking for a motion to approve selection of Director Austin Ward for the nominating committee from this body. Is there a motion? There is a motion. A second? We have a second. There's a motion and a second. All in favor of appointing.
Acclamation.
Yeah, by acclamation. Thank you. I was looking for that one. Director Austin Ward for the nominating committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Director Ward. Speech? No. All right. If it pleases the body, I'm going to move to informational briefings. We have presentations from on the Ride Alliance overview. Our presenter is Mallory Miller, Manager of Transportation Planning and Operations.
right, hello everyone. So my name is Mallory Miller, and I am the Senior Project Manager of this Right Alliance project that I'm excited to talk with you all about today. So this is my first time presenting to the Board of Directors, but I've actually been at DRCOG for 3.5 years now. So prior to being in this position, I worked on the Area Agency on Aging side and managed the transportation program over there. So that program offers free transportation to adults 60 and older throughout the Denver metro region. And when I was in that program, I had the opportunity to work on Right Alliance as we were working to secure new funding. So when this position was created, I applied because I understood the need for something like Right Alliance in the region, having been a manager of a human services transportation program myself. Why is something like Right Alliance needed? So just 2 months ago, in September of this year, DRCOG contractors had 1,048 trip denials. So that is 1,048 times that an older adult couldn't get to the grocery store to get food, couldn't get to a doctor's appointment, or couldn't get to wherever else they needed to go. And this is just for DRCOG contractors. This does not capture the entire unmet need in the Denver metro region or the state. So right now, there's no coordination between providers. So if I need a ride, I might have to call 3 or 4 agencies, giving them all the exact same information, taking up 4 agencies' time before I can get a ride. It also puts a burden on me as a client because different agencies have different scheduling policies. Some offer rides just 1 week in advance, some open up their rides a month in advance. So I have to understand how all of these different transportation companies work, where they service, where they go, who I can call for what ride. So that is almost a part-time job that I have to manage every single time I need a trip. Additionally, it puts a lot of burden on providers because multiple providers might speak to the same client for the same trip need. Right now, many transportation agencies also have a wait list for their services. And why they have a wait list is because the demand for transportation is growing. And why is the demand growing? Because our older adult population is growing significantly. So in just 5 short years, the U.S. Census Bureau and State Demographer's Office estimate that Colorado will see a 27.8% increase in the older adult population. So by 2030, 1 in 5 people are estimated to be over the age of 60. So this is almost 1.2 million people who will be over the age of 65. So that is an unprecedented demographic for Colorado. And it speaks to an urgent need for how we can figure out solutions to help older adults and people with disabilities get to where they need to go by maximizing our existing resources in the region. And so while Right Alliance isn't going to solve everything, ultimately a lot more funding is needed. Right Alliance will help. And so some of the goals of Right Alliance is to coordinate transportation services across the Denver metro region by utilizing a trip exchange hub that can exchange client and trip information between different transportation providers using transactional data specifications. And so what this does is create a no wrong door approach for clients seeking services. So clients can contact one participating agency, give one agency their demographic and trip information. If that agency can't do the trip, they can automatically send it through the exchange. So a client only needs to work with one provider in order to get services. It also allows for the maximization of our existing resources in the region because when a trip is sent through the Trip Exchange Hub, providers can view that trip, and if they have a client that they're already taking along that route, they can add that other denied trip to their ride. So it allows them to maximize capacity, fill empty seats on their vehicles. Additionally, the Trip Exchange Hub may be able to eliminate the silos that transportation providers experience. So funding puts restrictions on what service areas they can provide transportation in. So a lot of clients, health insurances are requiring them to go all across the region to get to certain specialty care appointments. And so right now, if a client needs to get across different county lines, they might be restricted and not be able to get that service provided to them. But the Trip Exchange Hub allows for the coordination of transportation across different boundary lines by allowing multiple providers to work with the client to get the trip. So Ride Alliance has been a longstanding goal in the Denver metro region. It first started with the Mobility Services for All Americans grant. This was led by the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Coalition, and through this grant, they developed the original Trip Exchange Hub. The Ride Alliance project was continued with the Veterans Transportation and Community Living Initiative grant. Through this grant, they further enhanced the Trip Exchange Hub. They integrated transportation providers, built a user interface, and were all set for pilot testing when the COVID-19 pandemic happened. So at this point, there were no trips that could be tested. And then the software that was used to build the user interface got sold to Uber, and then the grant funding ended for the project. So at this point, the Trip Exchange Hub was turned off until more funding could become available. So a funding opportunity presented itself through the bipartisan infrastructure law. This established the SMART grant, which is the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation grant. Through this grant, DOT is appropriating $100 million annually for 5 fiscal years for innovative transit projects across the nation. So DRCOG applied for a Stage 1 grant and received $975,000 this past July. The Stage 1 grants are focused on planning, and so figuring out how we can make this successful for the long term. So with our Stage 1 grant, we will be further enhancing the hub, figuring out how we can integrate providers, because since this was last started, or since this ended 4 years ago, some of the transportation providers have switched their scheduling softwares. So how it worked to integrate them in the past will no longer apply now. And then, of course, we will be piloting the Trip Exchange Hub. And then because we received Stage 1 funding, we are eligible for Stage 2 funding. Stage 2 funding is focused on a large-scale implementation, so making the Ride Alliance a reality in the Denver metro region. It's a 3-year grant opportunity with up to $15 million available. And just to kind of backtrack, this Stage 1 grant is an 18-month grant and ends in January 2026. So in order to make this successful, we are soliciting consultants' expertise on the technical aspect of the Ride Alliance project. We posted a request for proposals this past August, and Demand Trans and Transit Plus submitted a combined application. We are currently in contract negotiations with them. Demand Trans actually built the original Trip Exchange Hub. They worked on both phases of the Ride Alliance project with the MSAA grant and BTCLI grant. They're a leader in developing transactional data specifications, and they have worked on similar projects in the nation that will be invaluable to Ride Alliance. Transit Plus has a similar background. They've worked on a lot of transit projects across the nation. They worked on the VTCLI grant phase for the Ride Alliance project, and they recently worked with North Front Range MPO on their Ride NoCo project. So very excited to have their expertise with this Trip Exchange project. So the whole point of the SMART grant from DOT is to make projects that are scalable and replicable in other parts of the nation. And in order for Ride Alliance to be successful, it is helpful to have many providers integrated, as it allows for greater regional coordination. So when we applied for the SMART grant, we received letters of commitment from RTD, Douglas County, Dr. Mack, Via Mobility, and City and County of Broomfield. We've also recently spoken with North Front Range MPO and a little help, and we definitely anticipate more providers will become involved as our project progresses. So let's walk through how it would work from a very high-level technical perspective, how it would work for transportation providers to talk with each other. So the chart on the left depicts how transportation providers can communicate with each other without any Trip Exchange Hub and without any transactional data specifications. So in this chart, let's pretend that A, B, C, D, and E are all transportation providers. So we see that in order for A to talk with B, C, D, and E, they need to build a custom API for each of those providers. So for these 5 providers to talk, this requires 20 custom APIs. So this is not a cost-effective route.
It is not scalable. It reaches a point where there are just too many APIs to be built for it to be reasonable to continue. The chart on the right depicts the ideal scenario using both transactional data specifications and a trip exchange hub. Through this scenario, A can automatically communicate trip information to B, C, D, and E through the trip exchange hub because all of them are using transactional data specifications. This allows for one open API to be built. So in this scenario, if A were to make a change to their software, the trip exchange hub just needs to modify that one API, and that automatically communicates the change to all the other providers. In the chart on the left, without transactional data specifications and without a trip exchange hub, if A were to make a change to their software, B, C, D, and E would all need to change their individual APIs. So the option on the right is much more cost-effective, much more scalable, and allows for almost limitless providers to be incorporated in if everyone's using transactional data specifications. So while there's a clear financial benefit to using transactional data specifications and the trip exchange hub, let's walk through in greater detail what it currently looks like for a client when they need a medical ride. So let's say I'm 80 years old. I historically have been driving myself everywhere. I've been doing that for 65 years now. But I recently had an injury and I can't drive for the moment. And I have some upcoming medical appointments and I don't know how I'm gonna get there. I don't have any family in the area. I don't have any friends who can help me out with this. And I'm low income, so I can't afford to pay a taxi to take me 15 miles across town. I called my health insurance company, and unfortunately, they don't offer any type of transportation. So I called the doctor's office because I'm a little stressed and panicky at this point. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I've never been in this situation before. So I called the doctor's office. They connect me with their social worker, who refers me over to Dr. Mack. Dr. Mack is not a transportation provider, but they provide excellent information and assistance about the transportation options available. So when I call Dr. Mack, I give them all of my demographic information and I tell them about the types of trips that I have coming up. They provide me with referrals to a few agencies who may be able to help. So I call the first agency and I again give them all my all my demographic information and all my trip information. But unfortunately, this agency can't help me out. So I call the next agency. I give them all my demographic information, all my trip information, and they can't help me out either. So I call the last one, repeat this process, and fortunately, they can help out. They can give me this trip. But that didn't really alleviate my stress because I'm now realizing that this is my new reality, that every single time I need to go to the grocery store, every single time I need a doctor's appointment, I might have to spend hours of my day looking for transportation. Additionally, 4 different agencies have now had to have staff take down this exact same client and trip information, enter all this exact same information into their systems. So there's currently a significant burden on both staff and clients for transportation. So let's walk through what it would look like, past stage 2 funding once the Ride Alliance Trip Exchange Hub is fully implemented in the region. So let's say I'm that same person, low income, don't have social supports, new to needing transportation. So I call my doctor, speak with the social worker, they refer me over to Dr. Mack, but this time, Dr. Mack lets me know that although they're not a transportation provider, they can submit my trip request to the Trip Exchange Hub. So I give them my permission to do so, and I wait just a couple hours, and I get a call from a transportation provider who lets me know that they've got me covered for this trip. So this was a significantly less stressful and time-consuming experience for both myself and for providers, because the provider who is fulfilling the trip automatically received this information from Dr. Mack. They didn't have to call me a second time just to ask all the same information again. They already got that automatically sent to them in their system. So a much more efficient system.
So how we'll bring this all together, our immediate next steps for the project are by the end of this calendar year, we anticipate our contract with Demand Trans and Transit Plus will be executed. We'll be beginning memorandum of understanding agreements with transportation providers to integrate into the Trip Exchange Hub for the pilot phase. And then we have some pretty significant reporting requirements due to DOT next month. Throughout 2025, we'll be working on integrating those transportation providers into the Trip Exchange Hub. We will be further enhancing the Trip Exchange Hub so it works more seamlessly for providers. And then, of course, we will be piloting all that work to show that it's successful. And then we would, of course, apply for Stage 2 funding so that we can make this a reality in the Denver metro region. And that is all I have for you today. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I think this is a great opportunity here. So you mentioned we already have partners lined up, or that we're in the process of lining up partners. Does the Stage 1 grant funding include anything that would go to the partners to help them migrate their systems or adapt their systems to use this new OpenAI and the transactional data specifications?
So for the Stage 1 grant, yes, there is funding for the technical development of the project for providers, yes.
And then just my last question is, in the diagram, you made it sound like Dr. Mack would be kind of the gateway for a lot of these people, and that the main interface for our people needing rides would be through phone calls. Is that right? Making phone calls to Dr. Mack, and then Dr. Mack takes care of working with the hub?
I use Dr. Mack in that scenario because Dr. Mack is currently the designated, they provide a lot of travel training and information and assistance around that, but Dr. Mack could be replaced with any transportation company, any nonprofit in that scenario who provides information and assistance to clients.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that there's always the option for people to call, because I get this situation all the time. Many people over 80 are calling in this situation. This is the only way they can really be familiar with reaching out. And a lot of solutions out there are like, oh, well, we have an app, or, use the computer, and that's just not going to fly.
No.
It's not going to fly for a long time. Maybe when I'm 80, it'll work. But until then, we definitely need to have the phone call option for this.
I agree. Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Director Martinez. Director Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mallory. Very interesting concept. I would love to see it practice. Have you costed out the price to maintain it after the grant runs out? What would it cost from year to year? It doesn't sound like it's very costly once it's up and running, but obviously routine maintenance, upgrades, advances in software, et cetera. How would that be handled, and how expensive would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's actually part of the purpose of the Stage 1 grant, is to figure that all out, figure out how we can make this sustainable and, reasonably cost effective in the long term. So those are things we'll be working out as we go through this grant.
Thank you. This is, someone who, between my wife and me, we had to ferry around her 100-year-old mother, my mother-in-law, and I don't know what she would have done if we weren't here. Thank you.
Director Kondo, and then Director Mills.
Thank you, Mr. President. Or Chair, my question has to do with, a little levity this time of night helps, because I see some people yawning. Hey, coffee. My question, and maybe this is early days, but if you're talking about it, basically a software algorithm, I'm assuming the hub is going to be a server and the software residing somewhere. Have any notion or concept of where that might be?
So the Trip Exchange Hub is its own central database that's just used to transmit the information. So it's not necessarily using a software algorithm. Transactional data specifications are just a type of data specification.
I'll get with you offline or somebody just to
Okay.
get smarter on this. Thank you.
Director Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mallory, for your presentation. Will you go back about 5 slides? There is a back button.
I might need some assistance because I just see the.
Well, anyway, about 5 slides back, there was a icon of about, it looks like 7 different, it says potential partners. So when it says potential partners, does that mean all of these agencies need buy-in in order to participate? And if so, what if you only get buy-in by, 4 out of 7 or whatever?
So again, so RTD, Douglas County, Dr. Mack, via Mobility, and City and County of Broomfield did submit letters of commitment when we applied for this application for the SMART grant. Not everyone will be able to be integrated in the pilot phase because there is limited funds available with only that $975,000. But if we receive stage 2 funding, the goal would be to integrate as many providers as possible who are interested in participating.
So to be clear, with stage 1 funding, only a certain portion of these providers or any provider that's not even listed will be participating until we get to a higher funding phase.
More or less, yes.
Okay, so in a scenario like, and I'm going to give you a real life scenario, a resident in Brighton has a specialist that makes them go all the way down to Sky Ridge, which is down in Lone Tree, a 43-mile drive. Right now, if they want to go to a medical provider kind of locally, they can call the Via Mobility Services, get that ride arranged, and they're on their way. But now their specialist is down in Lone Tree. So are we working with Via and the whatever other partners that are on the screen in order to get them there? Or is that coming up in phase 2 or 3 of the funding?
Yeah, so kind of the purpose of the Trip Exchange Hub is it does allow for that coordination of multi-stop trips across boundary lines. So that might look like Via does one leg of the trip, and then, Broomfield or whoever comes in and fills in the other part of that trip.
So that means the individual with a mobility issue and a bum leg or whatever it is has to get into probably 3 different transportation devices of some sort. Or is it all in one somehow? I'm just trying to think, how is it easier for them to get down to that appointment on the other side of the metro area?
Well, right now they wouldn't be able to get there. So that's kind of the point, is that this would allow for the coordination so they could get there. Yeah.
All right. This looks great. I mean, I truly know people that live in my community that might have an appointment down in an area that it takes literally, like if they got an RTD, it takes them 3 hours to get there, when if they have a car, it takes them 40 minutes. So this would be great. Thank you.
We go to Director Spear, then in the queue is Sarah Nurmela, Director Nurmela, and Director Starker. So, Director Spear.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. This is a really an exciting project for the region. It seems that another big benefit is that the hub can streamline translation services and accessibility features, like for folks who have maybe hearing impairments or something like that, that individual providers may not have a particular language translation service or something like that. And I was just wondering if language and accessibility is going to be a part of the pilot, or if that might be a later stage.
That's a great point. And yes, that definitely will be taken into consideration as we're building this out. I think, more of that accessibility and everything else is more stage 2, but that's definitely a huge need. Is the Trip Exchange Hub needs to be accessible regardless of what language you speak, regardless of whether or not you know how to use a smartphone, if you only know how to call for a service, if it's easier for you to go online and enter that in yourself. So we definitely want many options for accessing the Trip Exchange Hub, when we don't want anyone to be, limited based off what language they speak.
Director Nurmela.
Thank you. And also thank you for allowing me to attend virtually this evening. I Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I definitely kind of live this in my daily life I have a parent who is legally blind and cannot drive and therefore can't get to appointments. And so the accessibility thing was actually one of my questions. So thank you, Director Spear, for asking that. My other question was the transit agencies. I see that RTD's on there, but when we're talking about multi-leg trips, does this at all interface with light rail or other types of bus, or is this mostly just kind of individual or shared ride kind of providers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as, the project progresses and with stage 2 funding, it would be, an ideal scenario, ideal to integrate like RTD's Flex Ride or their regular transit system. That's, not something that's in the scope for stage 1 just due to the limited funds and the different type of data specifications that are used between the softwares. But that's definitely a long-term goal.
Okay, and just for, I guess, the accessibility question real quick, I see that VIA is on there as a potential partner, and they do provide some level of, I guess, assistance for disabled. Would that functionality be there for them or as part of this exchange?
Sorry, can you just repeat that last couple of words for me?
Yeah, well, I don't remember what I asked. The VIA provider, I know that they do provide assistance with accessibility needs. Is that something that they would be able, I guess they would be able to provide that for a leg of the trip, although others may not?
Yeah, VIA would definitely still be offering like paratransit, even though other providers may not, have those types of vehicles available. The purpose of Ride Alliance is that transportation providers can, keep their current programs and, keep their existing resources. It just maximizes and allows for the coordination of what's already there.
All right, thank you.
Director Starker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mallory, for interesting presentation on an interesting program. It seems to me that somewhere along the line, somebody's going to want to exchange money for these services that are happening during the phase 1 or in other phases. Would this software integrate with a payment and a receipt program?
Yes, that's definitely a goal for stage 2, to be able to accept payments. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
I'm just curious, how much would it cost to just pay Uber to do this instead of reinventing a sort of Uber-like service? I'm just curious. Is there a sort of an alternative analysis that just says how much would it cost to just pay people's Uber?
Well, Uber is a very specific service. If you live in a rural area, you can't access Uber most of the time because there's no drivers available. Uber doesn't necessarily have their own paratransit vehicles available. They don't train their drivers on how to work with this population. You can pretty much only request a ride through the app on Uber. It's only in the last couple of months that they've released an option to call the schedule that has a lot of challenges at this point in time. So the service that Uber provides is vastly different than something that like Via Mobility provides, for example.
Executive Director Rex.
Thank you very much. And, Mallory did a great job explaining that. But I will tell you that we do have contracts with Uber. It is just Uber, right? With Uber right now. So for our ambulatory clients, Uber is a really good option, and it's cost effective too. We're able to do a lot more rides because of that partnership that we have. But I think we're talking more about those that need more accessible nature of rides.
Director Sherazai.
Yes, thank you. There's a new system, Co-op Colorado, and I wonder if that's something that we've looked at as well. Uber gives 20% to the drivers, 80% goes to Uber, where Co-op Colorado gives 80% to the drivers, 20% to the system. So brand new. all local drivers. They have about 900, so they are gaining traction, but that would be something that I think worth looking into.
Yeah, thank you for advising on that. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So I appreciate the question from Mayor Mills, Director Mills, about how do we fill the gap when the distance is significant? And that's one thing that the Lone Tree Link is looking to do, is continue to expand. So we would love to be able to be a part of the conversation. We've had great success with working with VIA. They have been a fantastic company to partner with. They have a lot of technology in the Lone Tree Link already. So as you look to expand, we would love to be included, because we really want to take care of the Denver South area in expanding the Lone Tree Link. So much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, yes. Oh, there we are. Director Douglas.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Chair. So with these providers, how are the funds going to be allocated? Is it based on trips, or are they going to get a set of funds for $100,000 and then they'll use that as part of this pilot program until that runs out? How's the funds going to be distributed?
So the funds are used to, build out the system for coordinating everything. It's not necessarily providing providers with extra funds to provide trips.
Providers already get paid for the service when they provide it, right? So this is just building the system for them to be able to
Right, but I'm saying the
integrate.
ones who are part of this program via mobility service, Metro, they're going to get upfront money?
Not through this grant. They get it through other means, through our, like, via mobility, they get, I don't know how much, it's quite a bit from our area agency on transportation services.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Mallory. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Presentation. Next up, we have Regional Housing Needs Assessment and State Compliance. This is attachment H in your packet. And we've got Director Sheila Lynch, Regional Planning and Development.
Good evening. Happy to be here again. I was here last month sharing about the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and we accepted that assessment. And we're back again, but we're back again for a really important reason. I mentioned last month that some of the new land use bills that passed in the last state legislative session have some impact on our Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And our team has been busy coordinating with the Department of Local Affairs. And so we wanted to bring this back to give you an update, because we're really committed to making our Regional Housing Needs Assessment a resource to all of your local governments. And so I want to walk you through some recent updates, just so you're in the loop and you understand kind of our, some timely next steps that we're going to take. So a little bit of context. We started scoping our Regional Housing Needs Assessment back in, I think, 2022, with many conversations with this board. We launched our Regional Housing Needs Assessment in October of 2023, and then we completed it and accepted it last month in October 2024. And our intention is to, before the first of the year, launch into our regional housing strategy, because the main reason for doing our needs assessment was to understand the scale and scope of needs so that we could come together and have discussions about regionally scaled strategies to address that need. And last spring, Senate Bill 174, which is now referred to as the Sustainable Affordable Housing Assistance Act, passed our state legislature. And among the requirements was that all local governments, with some exceptions, but almost all local governments across the state, will need to conduct and publish a housing needs assessment by December of 2026. There is one key exception, is that if local governments participate in a regional housing needs assessment, they can lean on that regional housing needs assessment and not have to necessarily conduct their own needs assessment. And there is also another allowance that if needs assessments that have been completed since January of 2022, they can submit them for acceptance by DOLA. So DOLA started convening local governments, DRCOG, many other entities back this summer to start thinking about implementation of this bill. And I'll just give a plug that DOLA staff has been wonderful in working with DRCOG. We've had many meetings to kind of talk through. There are a lot of things in the new law, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how does this work, and how do we really move towards getting our regional housing needs assessment accepted so that local governments can lean on it. So I mentioned a couple dates about local government having to develop their own needs assessments by December 2026, and this date that if you have an existing assessment, you can submit it by the end of this year to try to get that accepted. Well, another key date is that the methodologies for all these assessments are being developed now, and they will be published December 31st, 2024. So the same day that an existing assessment would have to submit and conform to a methodology, that's the date that the state has to publish the methodology. So there's some trickiness to that if you think through it. And so that is where I just want to give a plug for DOLA. Their staff recognized some of this early on and got with many entities early to talk through this, because it's hard to submit an assessment for conformity if we don't know exactly the methodology. So we have seen, our staff have seen a draft of that methodology, and I'll share a couple key dates. They expect to release an official draft of the methodology. They were hoping to do it last Friday. We got a message from them this week. They will have it by this Friday, so that we can see that and understand what needs to be included. The other key dates I mentioned was that by December 31st, they'll have the final methodology, and that's the date if an assessment wants to be go through a process of being accepted, it has to be submitted. So our key date is that we would like to pursue submitting for what DOLA has described as conditional approval for substantial compliance by, we're saying early December, mid-December, but before that December 31st date. And I wanted to walk through why we think this is important. I started by explaining that we really want to make this regional needs assessment available for local governments to use if they choose. They don't necessarily have to lean on it, but we want to make sure that it's available. And there are two pieces of what we know is going to be required in those methodologies that we have not done yet in our assessment. And one is a displacement risk assessment. And the second is a procedural step of allowing a 60-day review for local governments who have participated in the regional assessment to review and provide comments to us. And then we would, as the regional entity, include that in our submission to DOLA. So we haven't done those two steps. However, we do have a plan for doing that. The tricky thing is we can't do it by December 31st, 2024. And so we would then submit our assessment for this conditional approval with the understanding that we will still take those steps. The reason this is important is that we realize going out and asking for local governments to review an assessment that we yet don't know if it complies is kind of tricky. And so we worked with DOLA to walk through this conditional step, and we think it will really work. So then what it might look like for all of for your local governments is that we would submit we would get hopefully a thumbs up from DOLA that yes, it's substantially compliant, and then we would set up a process then to do both the displacement risk assessment and then also the procedural steps of doing a 60-day review. The other reason we think this is important to just keep moving forward is that we are ready to launch our regional strategy, and we want to kind of have a plan for our assessment and concrete next steps so that we're not spending a lot of months figuring this out. We really want to be able to launch by the first of the year thinking about strategies to address housing need. So we included this slide. You've seen it many times in many of our presentations, but this just gives you our reason or our timeline for doing this housing work. We started with an assessment, as I said, started back last year in October. We completed most of the work by July. We gained acceptance from the board in October 2024. We plan to start the regional housing strategy come the end of the year. And then our plan overall is to incorporate those strategies and what we come up with as a regional entity into our next updates in our regional plans, both the regional transportation plan and then also our next update to MetroVision. So I know that's a lot of dates, but happy to take any questions.
Oh, thanks. Question I always, there's a supply and demand question, and then there's a financial speculation question about Airbnb and short-term rentals and Blackstone investing in real estate. Out of Morrison, if we allowed Airbnb, that'd be 150 houses out of the supply. They would all be Airbnb. So how is the methodology going to distinguish between financial issues where you have a lot of housing that is in speculative domain, short-term rentals, versus a real supply and demand, and a sort of distribution of type of housing, like we have this Red Rocks Ranch development outside of Morrison, and we approved to have 300 multifamily units, and then now that they're starting building, they're going to blow off those 300 single multifamily units and convert them to 100 single-family things, and that influences affordability too. So this all the kind of stuff that goes into the methodology, and can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I may phone a friend because we have our wonderful data science and analytics team here as well. But I think that the idea is that the assessments give us a sense of the need. They may not account for all those nuances happening in each community, but I think the idea is to have an idea of how those things influence. Tax coming up, I'm so happy.
So I think I can best answer your first question in terms of things like Airbnb and other types of short-term rental, second homes. The methodology in the assessment, primarily found that while there are a significant number in this region, it's a declining number, whereas in other regions it may be an increasing number. So it's relatively small and it's declining. So it's not explicitly included in the supply and demand numbers out to 2050, but second homes are kind of taken out of that supply number. So that need number that for the region is taken into account, vacation and second homes. I'll probably pass it back because I think your second question is much more of a strategy piece, which would probably fall into our phase.
And I think your second question was about proposed developments, their planned portfolio, and then shifting and switching. I do think part of what we want to accomplish through our regional housing strategy is understanding what is the need, what are the type of units we're really talking about, and coming up with feasible strategies that can ensure and support developers in carrying out plans to do that. Because I mean, it happens all the time. I'm sure many different folks at this table can say, yes, we approved of development for these kind of units. And then when when developers go to get their financing or really start penciling it out, or sometimes they get delayed, and so 2 years makes a real difference, things start changing. And so I think our hope is that during the strategy development, we understand what are those barriers that keep us from falling through on some of those initially proposed plans, and how do we support the process in different ways so that we actually see those developments built out the way they were intended.
Director Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. Sheila, I was a little concerned about the fact that the DOLA's housing needs assessment methodology is still in draft form, but we've already completed ours. Sort of like, you know, we got the nursery ready, but we don't know if we're having a boy or a girl yet, right? So how much at risk are we right now? I'm sure that you've been working hand in glove with the state on this. How much at risk are we that we're going to miss the mark? I'll have to revisit this.
A great question, and I'm glad I emailed our DOLA folks this week to ask them, when is this methodology going to be released? But what their response was that what they've been presenting in most of the webinars or meetings to us about what will be included in the methodology, they don't see that changing much. Okay. So we've had some meetings and presentations. We have had to make some adjustments to our data dashboard that we presented to you. They're rather, I shouldn't say minor. It's a lot of work for Zach's team, but it's not substantial in changing the findings of a regional housing needs assessment. There are just different kinds of data that were referred to in the bill that we didn't necessarily include. And so we are making additions and changes to our data dashboard to be then in compliance with the methodology.
You have a high degree of confidence.
I do, yeah.
Thank you. I think it's really a very good thing that we have a regional assessment that our member governments can adopt and participate in. I think it's going to be a great savings. I'm really glad we were ahead of the curve on this work. Thank you.
Director Levy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sheila. I have some questions about the procedural steps and how this will work. I think if I understood your memo and your presentation correctly, I guess what I'm wondering, I'm not sure I do understand it. What you've laid out here is that full conformity requires each local governing body, local jurisdiction's governing body, to hold a public meeting and take comment and submit that to DRCOG, and that all has to happen within some 60-day review period. Is that required for DRCOG's regional needs assessment to be accepted, even if a local jurisdiction did not want to be able to adopt it for itself? I'm worried about that 60-day period and all of these local governments. Like, we schedule our public hearings many months out. Is it that we all have to do it for DRCOG's assessment to be accepted, or if we, the local government, want to be able to rely on it?
So it needs to be done, especially if the local government wants to lean on that regional housing needs assessment.
Yeah, okay.
We don't need to wait. If a local government does not want, decides we're doing our own, we don't have to wait and ensure that we get every local government doing that review and submitting those comments.
And do you know whether there is, the 60-day period when it starts? And
we can initiate that and work with local governments on setting that timeline. And just to give you an idea of what we're already thinking about is, we anticipate if all moves forward and we can submit in December, having some webinars or meetings with local government staff to walk through all this so that they're prepared for what the steps would be, and then building a comfortable timeline, because we know that local governments, often the agendas are set weeks and months ahead of time, and so that we can be realistic about when should we start that 60-day. So our goal overall is that December 2026 is the date when a local government would have to submit their housing needs assessment. We know that a local government, to determine if they are going to do that or not, they need at least 18 months to figure that out. Because if they decide to do their own, they may have to go seek funding, they may have to build that into a budget. And so while we would like to do this in a very timely fashion, so local governments have plenty of time to make those decisions, we will work with local staff come the first of the year, kind of map out a timeline and really get feedback on what's feasible for timing that 60-day review.
And this comment or question may be more appropriate for when we get to implementation strategy, but I think, you know, for I think we all in our respective areas, you know, have certain regional synergies and needs that definitely cross jurisdictional boundaries. And it would be really great to provide some sort of a forum by which, you know, maybe the municipalities in Boulder County and the adjacent areas, Broomfield, Adams County, et cetera, could, you know, peel off a portion of this and look at how we might develop an implementation strategy together. And so, you know, we would all need to coordinate on, are we all going to accept this? So there's a lot of other conversations that have to happen.
That's great context. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Director Lynch. We're going to move on to item number 14 in your packet, the 2050 MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan Major Update Kickoff. We've got Alvin Bedal Sanchez, Manager of Transportation Planning and Operations. Alvin?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Directors. So my item I'm excited to bring back before y'all, maybe not an oldie, but definitely a goodie, our regional transportation plan. I would actually like to start with a video to kick us off, set the framework for the discussion.
Five words you pronounce wrong 2 years before your brain starts shutting down. We're always on the go. Walking, driving, biking. We all have places to be. But how often do we stop to think about everything that makes it possible to get where we need to go?
Goodness for captions.
I know what happened.
The Denver Regional Council of Governments brings community leaders together from across 10 counties to decide how our region funds and prioritizes transportation investments. The MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan looks ahead to 2050 so we can prepare for our population's continued growth over the next 30 years. The plan anticipates the region's needs, and we're involving residents to learn how we can meet those needs, from expanding our public transportation network to improving our roadways to making biking and walking safer and more accessible. Learn more about the MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan and how you can shape the future of transportation.
A quick video. Apologies for those technical difficulties. Do not worry. I will reiterate many of those points in my slides. But this is one of our core products here at DRCOG as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so we are excited to kick off this effort with y'all today. For those who have been with DRCOG for a bit, you might recognize a version of this graphic in terms of our planning process structure. MetroVision really is our guiding document here at the agency, here in the region, our shared vision for the future. And one way that we implement that is through our regional transportation plan. There are two components to that. One is our MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan, and that one outlines all the needs we need over the next 20 to 30 years here in the region. And then there's our fiscally constrained Regional Transportation Plan. What can we actually afford over the next 20, 30 years with the resources that we think are available to us? And then just as the Regional Transportation Plan implements MetroVision, our Transportation Improvement Program that you heard of earlier implements the Regional Transportation Plan. When you open up our plan, it is a multimodal vision for our region. It will show all the different ways people walk, bike, roll, move through our region, as well as the way goods travel in, out, and through our region. It is physically constrained, so every line and dot on a map, every row in a spreadsheet, we think we can achieve over the next 20, 30 years with the resources that are available to us. It is not a wish list of projects. A key piece that I mentioned, the TIP implements the RTP. One way it does that is that any roadway capacity or transit capacity project that will be seeking funding through our TIP process first needs to be included in the Regional Transportation Plan. We do an update like this every 4 years based on our air quality status, and we do it with all of our partners, so CDOT, RTD, local member governments, E470, and other stakeholders in the region. So it is bringing all of our partners together during this 2-year process. Like I mentioned, we are required to do this update every 4 years, but we recognize that needs change in between that. So in between, we do provide an opportunity called cycle amendments to revise the plan for project-based amendments. The update that we are currently undertaking is to our 2050 MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan that was originally adopted in September of 2022. That was to meet the state's greenhouse gas planning standard requirements. That took about 9 months to a year, and that actually followed a 2-year-long process just to move us from our 2040 plan into our 2050 plan. And then we amended it in May of this year. We kicked off that effort in September of 2020. Our RTP rolls up all of the different work that's occurring in the region. It's not just our plans that we're reflecting on. It's all the different local member government, RTD, CDOT plans that are out there. What are the priorities that are being expressed in all of these different plans, processes, products, projects? We also look to our federal partners to make sure that we're in compliance with some of those requirements that come down to the agency. There are a number of different project types in the Regional Transportation Plan. The first two we're required to have in the plan, listed out and mapped. Those are our air quality, regionally significant roadway capacity, and rapid transit capacity projects. We've always included those in the plan. We'll always have those in the plan. This last major update, we did expand the types of projects that we show on our maps and show in our spreadsheets, and those are the 4 listed below that dotted line: safety, active transportation, freight, and corridor planning projects. This was an outcome from our scenario analysis work, as well as the feedback we were hearing from our public and stakeholder engagement. If we were hearing that we wanted more multimodal projects in the region, let's show those on our maps and in our rows of spreadsheets. And so during that project solicitation phase, we did expand the types of projects we went out for and ultimately included in our fiscally constrained plan. So you can open up our plan and see dedicated safety projects that are safety projects in and of themselves, not a roadway project that has a safety component, and same with each of these other project types. Through that process and through the engagement, we identified 6 priorities in the Regional Transportation Plan: multimodal mobility, freight, active transportation, safety, air quality, and regional transit. This was built through the different engagement that we did with our public and with stakeholders. One we heard pretty clearly from our Transportation Advisory Committee at the time was the importance of freight to the region, so that one got added to our 6 priorities ultimately in the Regional Transportation Plan. Then we tied investments to each of those priorities. So across our 10-county area, we do show projects across the 20 to 30 years of the life of the plan, and we're able to identify how those shake out in terms of the investment priorities that we've established for ourselves as a region. Some new ones that we haven't had before are about $1.2 billion for a regional bus rapid transit network here in the region. Like I mentioned, there's now about $550 million going to safety projects here in the Denver region. $970 million going to active transportation projects. And so you can see how that shook out during this last major update with our GHG planning standard work and the latest amendment. So a lot of investment across our region. Ultimately, you're looking at about $132 billion over the next 20 to 30 years being spent on transportation investments here in the Denver region. If it feels like we're always talking about the RTP this year, it's kind of true. We started an update and amendment cycle back in September of last year. We concluded that in May of this year with board approval. We got our approval from our federal partners in July, and now we're here before y'all officially kicking off this next major update to the plan. So we're anticipating this update will take 2 years to complete. It has to be approved by winter of 2026 from our federal partners. And so it's going to address all the different requirements that we have from our federal and state partners, and that continues to include the GHG planning standard work at the state level. The major activities that I'll delve into more on the next slide, but I'll touch on here, include an improved equity analysis for the plan, continued exploration of what scenarios could look like this cycle. We will have a project solicitation and evaluation stage. We'll have ongoing engagement, and of course, making sure all of the documents that we're putting out are accessible for the state's new requirements. We'll look at some of those major activities. We're currently exploring scenario planning. We've discussed it internally, have had conversations with the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Regional Transportation Committee, and we'll be back before y'all at a future meeting to continue that conversation. We hope to complete that in the second quarter of 2025. Financial planning is another major activity for us that rolls up all the different funding that we think is available in the region over the next 20 to 30 years. That's DRCOG funding, CDOT funding, RTD funding, discretionary, local government, toll authority, anything that we think will be spent on the transportation system here in the region we try to capture. Candidate projects, probably the most exciting for our partners and our local government partners. We will have a project solicitation and evaluation phase. We're aiming for summer of 2025 for that effort. Following that, we'll move into our modeling that's required. So our air quality conformity that we do for our federal requirements, and then the state's GHG emission reduction requirements that we have in place. We'll be updating all of the different documents that we have available. You can see on this slide, it's actually, we're anticipating taking much of the year of 2025. Beyond our 200-page main plan, there are about 19 appendices, an executive summary, a web map, and an online database. So making sure all of those are being updated and are consistent as we undertake this effort. Our public and stakeholder engagement, like I mentioned, we want to have ongoing over this 2-year period, but on this slide, you do see a darker yellow. That will be our official conclusion, our requirements in terms of public hearing, our official public review period, making sure our partners also have their own review opportunities. And then we're aiming again for adoption to get us in compliance with our winter 2026 due date. Beyond those major activities, there's also just a lot of other work that we'll be doing during this 2-year-long process. We do have to continue to annually report on our mitigation action plan that's part of our greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. We have a couple of tasks that we call definitions tasks. So we want to make sure that we have a public engagement plan that's specific to our regional transportation plan. There's a lot of work going on in the region by DRCOG, by y'all, by CDOT, RTD, our partners. We want to make sure we're not causing fatigue to our region's residents in terms of the engagement that we're doing. Where can we leverage existing opportunities? And how can we make sure that we're asking the right questions at the right time? Our regional roadway system is the network that creates eligible projects for our regional transportation plan and our transportation improvement program. That's one of the activities that we set at the beginning of this planning process, so we can make sure that when it comes time for the project solicitation phase, we're pulling projects from an appropriate network. An equity analysis, we've always done equity analyses here during the RTP, TIP, various plan updates, but we would like to improve that effort this cycle. We now do have an equity index here at the agency. We've piloted it through the TIP. We've included it in our Title VI implementation plan, so we'd like to see what would an equity analysis look like for our regional transportation plan. Obviously, a little different plan than our transportation improvement program. We show projects and investments across our 10-county area, so what do we mean when we're talking about equitable investments across a 30-year plan? And we want to make sure that the projects that we're showing in our plan, what we call existing, committed, showing in the plan without financial resources, or just all the needs we have, our vision projects, are reflected as appropriately. And then I touched on the financial planning task already on that previous slide, but just reflecting that we do want to make sure we're capturing all the funding that's available in the region and making sure we're intentional about what we think is actually available for projects, what's not already called for in programs. We recognize a lot has changed since 2020, so just a quick highlight of considerations that we have had as staff. There are different population and employment forecasts for the region from 4 years ago. At a future item, I'll be touching on what those changes actually look like here in the Denver region. There are more resources financially here available in the region than 4 years ago, both at the federal and the state level. How does that impact the planning that we're doing, the projects that we're showing in the plan? We were pretty aggressive last cycle in our financial planning assumptions. How is that actually shaken out with these new resources that are available to us? We have our new regional bus rapid transit partnership that is on the ground and is moving forward multiple bus rapid transit corridors in our region. We have a number of new plans that weren't available in 2020, including our TDM strategic plan, our regional transportation operations and technology strategic plan, and our regional housing needs assessment, as you just heard of. And then we're currently updating or about to start updating our active transportation plan, regional multimodal freight plan, and coordinated transit plan. So how can we make sure that we're aligning as many of those efforts as possible to make sure when we get to key milestones in the regional transportation plan, we're pulling the most appropriate needs, visions, priorities from those. Some next steps following this kickoff, we've already provided notice to CDOT and CDPHE as part of our requirements related to greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. We want to continue exploring scenario analysis options. Like I mentioned, a future item before y'all will be discussing what could scenario analysis look like this cycle for the region. We want to provide deliverable specific updates when it's appropriate. So those will include our regional roadway system discussions, our definitions of projects in the region, and our equity analysis, how that's shaking out, how it's being tested. We'll be starting outreach to partners related to financial planning. We want to make sure that we're getting the latest available information related to different agencies, financial outlooks. We can include that in our regional transportation plan. And then we want to keep coordinating with CDOT on their 2050 statewide plan update, making sure both of our products are aligned as much as possible. So both feed off of each other as appropriately. That concludes my presentation, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? Yes, Director Maurer.
Thank you, Alvin, for your presentation. I was wondering about this myself. In thinking about the recent legislation that's passed, you know, the House Bill 1313, and I saw that you had the regional housing study up here as one of your considerations. And so are you going to be going back to agencies and asking them their plans as far as, you know, updating what they look at more, adding more density, and that, of course, that's going to increase traffic?
As part of the effort, we do look at other plans that are already available in the region. I'm not sure they would be a specific ask of each of local member governments. Part of that regional housing needs conversation could also just come through in different ways during the plan process, not just a look at your plans, but maybe in the scenario work, what could we test during that effort that gets to some of those questions, get to some of what you're seeing in your own, with your housing strategy work, new density work. So I think it'll filter in through the plan in a couple different ways. It might not just be us reviewing the latest versions of your plans available. But as part of the update process, we do make sure to work through a small area forecast activity with local member governments. So that's something that we lock in at a certain point in the plan based on population and that is distributed across the region.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, I would encourage everyone to look at the informational items in your packet. We do have a draft 2025 policy statement on state legislative issues. Just want to check and see if there were anybody read ahead and has any questions about it.
I will tell you, there's very minor changes to that document. We made a pretty big overhaul last year, so just FYI.
Encourage you to read those over, though, and let us know if there's any changes. We're going to move on to item number 17, committee reports. I'm requesting that these reports be brief and reflect decisions made and information germane to the business of DRCOG. State Transportation Advisory Committee have Director Odoricio online?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, but increase the level of volume.
All right, is that any better?
Yes.
All right. So the STAC went over the 2025 budget and the STAC work plan. We also had discussed the travel survey. The bottom line is that the STAC is still trying to, we have some new leadership. We have a new chair, and the STAC is going to continue to have conversations about what is the true impact that STAC wants to have and the type of influence it wants to have with the Transportation Commission. So I suspect there's going to be more discussions along those lines over the coming months, especially as some folks are looking at trying to increase their representation on STAC by adding another potential member. So these are all things that we will be looking at. I know DRCOG, it doesn't help us for the folks outside of the Denver metro area to have another representative. But I'm not even sure it really helps the folks outside of the metro area too. So I think the focus needs to be on what we can do is focus on more efficiency and effectiveness with the folks at CDOT.
Thank you very much. Report from Metro Mayor's Caucus, Director Starker.
Thank you, Chair. The caucus has not met since our last meeting, so I have no.
Report from Metro Area County Commissioners, Director Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. The MAC met on November 15th for their year-end meeting and brunch social. We had good attendance at that meeting, which was wonderful. They just talked about their priorities for the upcoming year. We have a new chair, council member, I guess commissioner, in this case, Commissioner Darrell Watson is the new chair of the MAC. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We're going to go to E, report from Regional Air Quality Council. Again, Director Rex.
Thank you, sir, very much. The MAC, the RAC met on November 1st. They used their regular meeting time to hold a retreat, something we haven't done in many, many years. We have a lot of new members, and it was wonderful to see them in person. Quite frankly, I couldn't pick half of them out of a lineup. So it was awfully nice to get together with them and see them. It was hosted by Adams County at the Riverdale Animal Shelter in Adams County Regional Park. So that was quite something. And Commissioner Henry knew what she was doing, because I know there was at least 2 adoptions of cats that day. Not me, but there were a couple cats that were adopted, which was wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Yep. All right. E470 Authority, Director Dyack.
Thank you very much, Chair. At the last meeting, we ratified a new vendor for our transponders, Newology. And then we had a third quarter financial review. Traffic is up, but again, as always, expenses are up as well in this environment as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a report from CDOT. Darius, Director Patba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Transportation Commission has met for their workshop earlier today and will be meeting for their meeting tomorrow. Items for discussion included a Burnham Yard briefing with the Colorado Transportation Investment Office, a right-of-way condemnation request, approval of the draft FY26 budget. The final budget, of course, won't be approved until March. A new interchange request for US 34 called Merge in Greeley, a Build America Bond refunding workshop, and a access appeal in Durango. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. RTD, Director Siroy.
Thank you, Chair. And as many of you know, 7A did pass. I wanted to thank this board for your support. 71%, so we feel very good about, that people do value transit in this region, and so we are going to continue on with our mission of providing as much as we can. Wanted to also say that our board will be voting on the January service change on the 3rd of December. It's like I think I may have mentioned last time, it's the first service change in several years that we are actually increasing service. We're increasing it on both the rail side and the bus side. So again, hopefully this is the trend up from where we've been. Also want to mention that we are finishing up our facilities and fleet transition plan. We're looking at how we may transition to a zero fleet emission over time. The focus of that has been a lot on our facilities because we have aging facilities. Most of our facilities are over 40 years old. So in terms of accommodating a fleet, a zero emission fleet and new technology, that's a big part of that. So that will be finished up early next year. And lastly, as many of you know, we will have 7 new board members that will be seated on January 7th. So 7 out of 15 will be brand new. So that will be, I'm sure, a learning experience for all of them and all of us at RTD too.
Thank all of you for your attention tonight. And I would like to ask Director Tammy Maurer if she could come to the front of the room, please. Ladies and gentlemen, the big block of wood. That's right. Honoring people for 5 years of service. It actually takes 5 years to get these done. So this is actually more than 5 years.
Yes, it is.
But Tammy, congratulations.
It's been under my desk for a while.
It's been desk for 2 years?
Long time.
Yeah, anyway, thank you very much. Congratulations.
Our next meeting will be on December 18th. We are debating whether or not that will be a virtual meeting or not. We'll be discussing that at the work session on December the 4th. So if you have strong feelings about that one way or another, come to the work session. Right? Are there any other matters? If not, we are adjourned.